right, welcome everybody to episode 73 of the Unchained Vodcast. Today we have Brand and myself here to talk
Welcome.
about the Veil. Specifically to talk about stealth, not just the Veil in general. What we're really going to talk about today is the mechanics of stealth in general, but also specifically looking at the Veil Stalker and how they cross in and out of the Veil, how that works with the game, how all of these things kind of mesh together, and how they're different from other MMOs, and how that is important for balance, what sort of things might need to be considered, how certain things might need to work, and to kind of begin that, I just wanted to address kind of what the core difference is, at least from our current understanding of the stealth system for Veil Stalkers crossing into the Veil compared to other MMOs. And in other MMOs, you go invisible when you're a rogue or a stealth or something. You generally just go invisible. You're still there physically, but you're moving around and people can't see you. You can't move through people. They're still, or well, if there's no collision, you can, but you can't just move through people. You're generally moving adjacent to people. They see you, so on and so forth. But in this game, Veil Stalkers at least will go not invisible. They really transport into the Veil itself, into another plane of existence almost, or another state of being, and they're effectively not there, so you can't see them anymore, you can't interact with them, and then they are traveling through kind of almost this extra planar sort of
It's like a layer of the world on top
yeah.
of the real world.
So that's what we're going to look at, like how does that impact other aspects of the game, because I think there's possibly a lot of different things with how that works compared to, like, you know, the camouflage of the archer or the stealth, true invisibility or cloaking sort of abilities of like the scouts. So, I think the biggest thing to talk about, and I just want to hop right into it really, is physical objects in the world. When Veil Stalkers or Stealthers or whatever you want to call them, when Stealthers hop into the Veil, do the physical keeps in trees and other objects of the world, are they manifest in that Veil? Do they appear, or are they just in some kind of a weird flat tundra navigating the world?
I think they should be. Whether or not they will be, we don't know. But I do think that there should be the physical limitations that exist for all the other players as well. Otherwise, you start opening up to some pretty interesting mechanics of creeping through walls as a stealth, to like an enemy wall, to break right through and then come out on the other side, bypassing lots of work and time building such a defense that is just completely no longer useful, at least against stealth.
Yeah, I think it's this. It's also, I think, the simplest way to implement the Veil. If all they have to do is do some kind of a texture shift and maybe add some elements and things and take some things away, but mostly the terrain and stuff just stays the same, and it just changes, it becomes shadowy or indistinct or whatever they want to do to it. Kind of like when you're dead in WoW and you're walking back to your body.
Yeah.
That's probably going to be a lot easier to design and implement than if they have to create a whole new terrain. And also, as you said, it's just, if they don't represent those keeps and stuff in the world, then if you could theoretically walk through walls at that point. You could just walk through someone's keep and reappear inside their keep and go, ha, I'm in your keep.
Yeah. Your walls mean nothing to me.
Yeah, that's kind of a problem. I do think on this, do think they should do some definite texture shifts. They should change the lighting and the texture so that when you're in the Veil, things look different. And perhaps there are differences in like draw distance and stuff like that, so you can't necessarily see as far.
Sure.
And you can't see it in as much detail. Like maybe things are indistinct. You can't really just walk around and be like, I know exactly what all these things are. I would kind of like to see almost like and I know this may not make sense to many people in the chat, but I would like to see something of like an Umbra from like Werewolf, where you go in and it's like a shadow world. Like there are shadowy representations of everything that exists. You can more or less tell what they are, but, you know, it's not like a super high detailed thing. It's just kind of a shadowy representation of something that exists.
And honestly, that's just a lighting thing. I don't even think they need to make new textures to do anything like that. It's just shader elements in the engine itself to make those changes. Should be super easy to do.
Yeah, as Grimslag said, it'd be easier to kind of copy everything that exists and represent it in some kind of a grayed out fashion, or something along those lines.
Yeah, and I like the idea of not being able to see too far with that kind of less sight, less render draw, especially because what we know at least is you're not supposed to permanently be able to walk through the veil. It's not like a normal stealth mechanic. A rogue in WoW can stay stealth literally the entire time they're logged in if that's all they want to do and not interact with things. That's not the case in this game. There's a time limit or a blood limit, a resource limit of some kind.
And I think the important thing about maybe restricting the range of the sight in the veil, and also maybe removing some of the detail, is if they can go into the veil and they can see everything as clearly as anybody else is, then scouts start to become pointless. You start to remove some of that role of the scout class and just give it to the stealthers and go, well, I can just go into the veil and I'm safe and they can't hurt me and I can just see whatever the hell I want.
Right.
They're not there. They're not in the veil to see things. They're in the veil to find a specific target and then to mess with them and kill them.
And that's part of the balance as well, not just balancing stealth and the concept of the veil, but balancing their role in the meta of class distribution and responsibility.
Now, assuming that structures will be in the veil and they can't move through structures, what do you think about moving through people? Because there is player collision in the game, but they're in a different plane, sort of, now. They're not physically in the same region. So should people show up? Should they be able to see people? And if they can see people, should they collide with people or be able to move through people?
They, from the components listed on the current stealth website, or the website for each stealth variant, there are components that specifically state that you use the ability while in the veil to do an attack against somebody. So that assumes that you will see them at least. Whether or not you can physically go through them is, I'm going to say, probably should be able to physically bump into them, because that then opens up all the other elements of air and interaction with stealth units as well. So you could technically blindly fire a spell and hit someone in the veil if that were the case.
Yeah, see, I don't feel like they should be able to do that, to interact and hit people in the veil, because that then does potentially cause problems for stealthers and moving around. And then say the stealth group's trying to sneak in and people are just kind of spamming AoEs in certain areas to be like, is there one over there? Is there one over there? And then they see damage pop up and they're like, oh, they're over there. But it's kind of, as Skylar said, I think it was Skylar. Maybe. Killing mages, yes. Talking about killing mages. I do think they have to be able to see people to some degree to target them. I do think, again, maybe it should be indistinct, and maybe they have to get to a certain range of people to actually see details of, like, okay, what class is this, what's going on, so that they can't just, again, scout from the veil. But, so they have to at least get within a reasonable distance of somebody to see what kind of class it is and stuff, to see if they want to attack them. But I actually feel like maybe they should be able to, if they have an ability that can hit someone through the veil, they should be able to target these people. But I actually feel like they should not have player collision, because I actually feel like that would be a pretty good compromise. Like, they have the restricted vision. They have restricted detail maybe in vision. So they can't scout. And they can't go through walls. But maybe they can go up to a front line of heavy fighters, and they can just walk through it to get to where the mages and the healers are. They could just walk through the line, get up behind them, and go, pop, hello, and then stab them.
Yeah, that does open up concern, because if you can interact with them, you can then interact with anything, and anything can interact with you. It should go both ways at that point. And there would be concern to not be targetable while you're in the Veil by anything, since they can't see you.
Yeah, my main concern
And
is them being able to fulfill that role. Being able to kill
right,
mages and healers, and if they can't walk through a line of heavy fighters, how are they going to get to the back of a keep to attack
also
the
true.
healers?
So it's hard to differentiate that then, because walls count as physical objects, as do players.
Mm-hmm.
And the way the air system is currently, assuming the way they're going at it, is everything that is physical is all just physical. There's no differentiation between what is and what types of physicalness there are. It's just physical. It's a real object.
Unless they introduce some sort of a state change
Right.
for people, so that when you shift
Like,
into the Veil, people are no longer physical; they just show up as some kind of a visual representation
mhm.
that for you may be targetable, but isn't interactable unless you're using a specific ability or something that then, as I recall, those abilities either take you out of the Veil or it pulls them into the Veil.
Yeah, there's definitely ones that can pull you out, pulling other people who are also in the Veil with you out of it. And I have the Veil Walker or the Veil Stalker, which is the Arthurian Stealther, pulled up, and they have a sample component that is specifically an attack from the Veil, which then pulls you out by doing the attack.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying is it's not actually you hitting them while you're in the Veil. It pulls you out of the Veil and you stab
Right.
them.
Mm-hmm.
So even if they did do some kind of a state change, that wouldn't necessarily be a problem because then it just
Right.
reverses it to pull them out. I do think it's there's perhaps a reason to have that difference of not being able to walk through, like, say, stone and castle walls, but being able to walk through people, because it does give them access to a keep to some degree, which we were kind of saying, like, we don't want them to be
Mm-hmm.
able to just backdoor into a keep, but it restricts it because they can only go through doors. Essentially, they still have to go
Right.
through the door area and through lines of people. They can't just like walk through walls. So because that actually opens up other possibilities, because there have to be some kind of counters to stealth.
Mm-hmm.
And so those counters can be focused on the doorways because we know, okay, they've got to come in through the door, one of these
Right.
doors.
I mean, if they could walk through walls at that point, they could walk through trees, large
Mm-hmm.
rocks, anything
Yeah.
without worrying. So I imagine they'll probably try to play some sort of difference between a static physical object and a mobile or non-static physical object, which would be players, and anything that's moving through the air system as a spell or projectile.
And that actually, that kind of brings up the another question I wanted to ask, which is when it comes to stealthers, what methods do they need to be in the game to counter them? What should there be ways? We know that when a group of stealthers are moving together, they're going to make some kind of a noise because they disrupt the veil. So they're going to make some kind of a noise or disruption to people who are near them. So if they're, if you're walking and there's a group of stealthers near you, if you're paying attention, you're going to be able to hear something that'll kind of clue you into the fact that there are some stealthers around you. It won't show them to you, but it'll be like, oh crap,
Right.
that's not good. You'll have a spider sense type thing that's going, this is weird, I don't like it. But should there be specific types of traps or detectors that can reveal or at least alert you to the presence of stealthers?
I think it would be actually kind of neat, as you bring up traps or detectors, to have a craftable object that crafters can add as a consumable item to kind of draw elements of the veil into a more visual uh, thing for non-stealthers to be able to see. Um, but I do think that I think there's a stat that has to do with concealment, the opposite of that, that might be able to be utilized to see maybe just a fading visual in the world. You don't see like the player, but almost like Predator, you can kind of see a little bit of that distortion in the world around you as they're walking. Maybe something that opens that up to have a chance to see it if you have that stat high enough.
Um, I didn't want to jump off this topic quite yet, but Grimslag brings up an interesting question. If someone pops out of the veil to either perform an action or whatever reason they pop out of the veil, should there be some kind of an alert that goes out to people around them?
Um, Not a like a global wide alert or even a local alert, but if you're close enough, there will be an audio clip that is
I think it's,
associated with the ability.
yeah, I think that's more what he means. And actually, I think that would be good if there's some kind of like a popping sound or some kind of a disruption sound of them
Hmm.
emerging from the veil, which then to people who are paying attention should alert them to, oh crap, there's a stealther, and then they turn around and their healers back behind them getting stabbed in the back repeatedly. Uh, but if they're not paying attention, if they're too focused on pewing the people in front
Right.
of them, maybe they don't hear it, and the stealther is just running around in circles, crying for help and dying. Um, I could see an argument either way, though. For you know, maybe you need to keep a visual on your healers and your mages,
Hmm.
and or at the very least, it might also depend. Maybe if you do an ability like the Veil Stalker has that attacks from the veil, that makes a noise. But if you just like transition sneakily in the corner, that doesn't make an audio kind of alert or anything.
Yeah, typically they set ranges to the audio, so after a certain range, anyone out of that range won't hear it. So you have to be within a certain proximity.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's always that, especially in SWTOR or even WoW, I guess is more famous. There's that low kind of whoo, when a stealth kind of walks by you and you see them and they pop up in your visual just momentarily and then disappear again.
Mm-hmm.
There's usually that kind of audio clip when you notice them briefly.
Yeah. But back on to traps and detectors. I actually agree. I would like to see some kind. I think it would be cool to have crafters be able to create some kind of a consumable. I think there would have to be limitations on it because obviously you don't want to ruin stealthers by making it so that there's just detectable objects everywhere and they can't go anywhere. But I think there's a couple things they could do. One, it could be expensive. So it's not something you want to, and time limited. So it's not something you want to drop down all over the keep. But maybe you could drop one or two here or there, and they'll last for like 10 minutes. And,
Hmm.
you can go, so you could at least go, okay, for 10 minutes, they're not coming through this door. We know that. Or one thing that I think would also be interesting is if you could put down traps or at least detectors of some sort, and if scouts could identify and either destroy or temporarily disable them, so that stealthers could then creep through.
Sure, works
Because
both
that
ways.
that would add like a more of a three-pronged mechanic to it, where the stealthers, though they are solo, they are theoretically better if scouts are helping them, and it would give more role to scouts during siege because they can go and find these things and identify them and just maybe tag it at a range and go like, bing, there's a thing there, and then the stealther gets a pop-up and knows that he's got like 2 minutes to sneak past or something before it
Right.
re-enables. Um,
On that same note, with scouts, scouts, I think all the scouts have a marking mechanic
exactly.
that allows them to seemingly kind of sounds like a hunter's mark from World of Warcraft.
Mm-hmm.
Where you can put a mark on a player that could be utilized perhaps to target stealthers while they're out, and then maybe have some interaction with them once they go back in, so you have a little better visual of where they might be when they're hiding. Not sure how they'll do that specifically, but that there are some cool things that they maybe could do with that as a counter to stealth.
Yeah, I do like the idea of scouts as part of the counter measure to stealthers as well, because it just again gives them more of a purpose during siege battles and stuff if they can be kind of scouting around and finding stealthers and then marking them so that people know they're coming or know where they're at, even if they can't hit them. Just
Mm-hmm.
I guess scouts being some kind of a mobile detection unit for stealthers is appealing to me because then it becomes more of a cat and mouse game. Stealther can get
Right.
to somebody and attack them, but they've got to avoid where those annoying scouts are. I think if they did that though, then the scouts should maybe appear a little bit different in the veil. Maybe they themselves have some kind of a reverse distortion or something in the veil, so that not something like super prominent, like a beam of light, but
Mm-hmm.
if the Veil Stalker has high enough perception, or they are paying attention or something along those lines, they can see them maybe from a little further away and be like, okay, I've got to stay away from that guy, and they know they've got to kind of circle around or whatever. just again, so it's more of a active system than just the scout being there and be like, all right, if anyone walks next to me, bing, there you are, haha, I found you.
That would be cool.
I do also like the idea of, obviously Banes and Boons are going to have to come into play in this in some capacity, as they do with every class. And so there's going to have to, that can potentially increase, detection, maybe decrease penalties and blood cost when you're in the Veil, or whatever that's going to look like. We don't really know. I'm not sure about buying the sounds they create when they come out of the Veil. That would be... that's more of like a character customization. Would be interesting, though.
I think stealth will also be, to some extent, the anti-stealth, with the way some of their at least sample components are looking like, drawing other people in the Veil out with you. I'm under the assumption that only stealthers can get into the Veil.
Yeah.
And therefore, you're drawing out other stealthers at that point. Whether or not all three factions have that component for their stealth class, not sure, but I could see some stealth wars going on there and trying to hide from other stealthers nearby, and especially if there's a much more restricted visual, trying to keep your distance and move around without being seen.
Yeah, I really like the idea of scouts being supplementary to stealth, like being able to operate defensively for their own units and detect stealthers within like a short range. I'm not saying like a really long range detection, but if a stealther walks past a scout, then they can mark them or something and be like, there's a stealther that lasts for a short while. Things like that, but they can't actually hit them except to maybe mark them. That's about all they can do. Whereas,
right.
and then maybe they can do something offensive, like identifying detection things and stuff for stealthers, or even just detecting other scouts. But then on the flip side, having the stealthers themselves, again, still operate as the offensive and defensive version of stealth, operating as the counter to their own type of unit on the other side. Which I think fits a lot with what they've said they wanted to do with stealth. They've kind of, it does sound like over time they've simplified the idea a little bit for what they wanted to do with the Veil and the stealthers and everything. But I think they, it has felt like they're backing away from the original concept, which sounded a lot more like you might have a full-on stealth war going on in the same space as the physical battle, and to where more now where like those are still, the conflicts might happen, like they're gonna be countering each other, stealther versus stealther in the Veil, but perhaps not in quite as complex a manner.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad it seems to be going towards stealthers only for the Veil, of keeping it towards that. It gets complicated otherwise.
Well, originally they were talking about like two different stealther classes. They were kind of the
right.
stealthers that go around and kill other people, and then the stealthers that go in specifically to kill other stealthers. And they kind of simplified and smushed them into one. We're like, why don't we just have one stealther? And that's the only one that goes in the Veil. I do think it would be interesting. Someone kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it would be interesting if mages, if spellcasting classes were more prominently visible from within the Veil, because of when they were casting spells, it causes distortion or something. So the stealthers could be creeping around, then they see like a little white distortion, go, oh, there's a healer, and they start creeping over towards him. That would be an interesting mechanic for helping the stealthers find targets, because then that could be something that would show from a longer range or something, comparative to other things.
Just thought of another possible just natural counter to stealthers, which is because they utilize the Veil so frequently. We know that increased use of magic causes Veil storms over, eventually, a bigger. Eventually, if an increased use of the Veil through stealthers further increase that to a higher degree. So the more stealthers you have in an area, and the more they keep going in and out of it, the more likely, more so than just using a whole bunch of magic, a Veil storm is going to take place. It's kind of just a small, just natural deterrent to maybe not doing that so much.
Mm-hmm. I do also wonder if, they have kind of suggested at times that the stealthers being in the Veil perhaps angers the Veil as well. So I have kind of wondered if stealthers also exacerbate that whole Veil Storm issue. So it's not just spellcasters doing it, but also
Mm-hmm.
people jumping in and out of the Veil. So we've powered through a lot of my questions. I only really have like one left, but I did want to see if there were any specific stealth things you wanted to address before I go into that.
Oh boy.
I mean, you've read stuff and everything.
I have read, about stealthers, the classes. Not so much questions. More so on the balance of it. We've talked a lot about how we're going to get people across battlefields without being obliterated by the sheer amount of ranged classes in this game so far. And I think stealth is definitely a very needed thing to accomplish that goal. And it's not going to be in for a while, from what we know, which is an issue.
It doesn't seem like it's going to be in for launch, which I do agree is kind of an issue. I'm not a fan of playing stealth classes. I don't usually play a stealth class. I think the only time I really played a very stealth heavy class was Star Wars: The Old Republic, and but I feel like it's having them versus not having them is such a big change to the balance of the game that I can't see how the game is going to make that transition post launch.
Yeah, and I guess that would be my question is, with balancing stealth as what stealth is, how do you balance the meta change once it comes in to play?
Exactly, because that's like a full expansion in my mind. Like the level of change and shift for the game, that's like a full expansion worth of change. That's gonna just completely shift the meta because now you suddenly have to deal with the Veil and with scouts, and because scouts may or may not, but probably won't be in for launch either. So you've essentially the only stealth mechanic that as far as I recall anyway, that's planned for launch is camouflage for archers. Mm-hmm. Which is stand still and be invisible or be hard to see anyway.
I know the scouts also use camouflage and they're allowed to move with it. So I wonder if archers will also be allowed to move with it.
I don't think so. Like, as I recall from the descriptions of camouflage, them talking about it, or at the very least, maybe they'd be able to move real slowly or something. But as I recall, I think it's supposed to be very much like you get in position, you activate camouflage, and you sit there and wait to ambush somebody kind of thing. You're not moving around. I could be wrong about that, but
at least for the Spectre, the Arthurian scout, their first form talks about greatly increased camouflage and movement speed, which implies at least you can do both, or that you should be doing both, perhaps during that form change when they go Spectre mode. Or it could imply maybe you just run really quick and then kind of stop and hide, and then run really quick and then stop and hide. But
All right, I got that link to that forum topic. I'm going to skimming it real quick. I obviously don't have time to read it. That was linked to me from MMORPG.com. I don't go to that site ever.
While you read that, does anyone else have any kind of weird questions about stealth?
I'm just skimming it real quick to see if there's anything relevant here to bring up. And it's mostly about the the purpose of stealth, which I think we've covered to a large extent, because I do think each class has a different purpose for stealth and a different method for stealth, of course.
Yes.
For the archers, the main purpose of their stealth, I think, is to hide from people who they don't want to fight. Is to be able to pick their targets, to hide from people they don't want to fight, and to be able to ambush targets that they do want to kill. So, like I said, either they can't move or they can only move a little bit when they're camouflaged. They move real slow or something. You know, this standard like rogue crouch and hide and creep along kind of stealth. Whereas the scouts, they're really invisible to find threats and find targets and to maybe have some kind of debuffing effects on the field or something, but not to, or maybe sabotage things in the keep. So they're really all about invisibility and mobility. They are much more so going not visible, and then they don't want to be going slow. They need to be able to move fast. And if in fact they seem to be able to move faster than anybody else, while hard to see. Maybe not invisible, but hard to see. And then, of course, not the Veil Stalker, but they used to all be called the Veil Stalker. So
The stealther class.
The stealther class. Obviously, the point of them being invisible is to kill stealthers and to kill other people. So they're really more about just avoiding the main line, getting behind people, and then popping out and dealing tons of damage.
Do you feel that there will be any element of kind of a get out of jail free card or escape for free situation that most rogues tend to get an ability that just like an instant pop into stealth and kind of restart their whole cycle? There's usually like a button mashing cycle they go through, and they unload everything on you. If you're not dead, then they pop that other go back into stealth and then start over again situation. Do you think you're going to see a lot of that in this?
There's been a lot of discussion about that on and off, as I recall, and I want to say that they've said before that that's really not their intention, but as I recall, one of the class reveals, they did have an ability kind of like that. I don't remember which one it was, but I want to remember one of them had something where they could kind of pop back in.
The red cap has a one that does that.
The way I would like to see it, I actually do feel like each of them should have some way to jump back into the veil without having to be like, all right, 2 minutes of concentration, not going to ever get to use this. I do feel like they should have some way to get back in, but I don't think it should be able to be used as a kind of oh shit button where they can just like pop in, attack someone, stab, 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 and then pop back out. Instead, I feel like it should be the sort of thing where, like, maybe it's on a cooldown. Like, maybe they can't shift back and forth into the veil for a certain span of time, like 15 seconds or something. So they pop out, they've got 15 seconds no matter what, where they can't go back in yet. Or maybe there's a really bad consequence if they do or something. So then the reason for that is if they pop out, and they stab, 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 and people aren't paying attention or there aren't enough defenses, and they can survive for that full 15, 20 seconds, whatever it is, then they can pop back in and be like, too bad, you didn't kill me, bloop. I just don't want them to be able to pop out, and then in like 5 seconds, they do a bunch of DPS, and then they disappear again, because that's going to be really infuriating.
Yeah. Such an ability is usually on like a 2-minute cooldown timer, so you can do it at least like once every fight in your typical MMO.
Yeah, I would much rather see. I would like to see them be restricted so that if they do, basically what I'd like to see is if they do something stupid or intentionally self-sacrificing and jump out into a mob of enemies solo and start stabbing away, they're not going to be able to escape that because they shouldn't be able to. They should die for that. But if they pop out into the mob of enemies, into like one enemy, and maybe there's one or two other ones there, or maybe they have their own squad, and the enemies don't focus fire them, so they've got like 15, 20 seconds where they survive, then by all means, they either picked a good target, or they, for some reason, they survived long enough, they should be able to bamf back out and go, all right, we're going, pew, and then fade back out of view. It's on one part on them to pick proper targets, and on one part on the defenders to focus fire and kill them. And if those things line up in their favor, they should be able to bamf back out and escape. That's how I feel about it anyway.
I'm sure there'll need to be some balancing of that time frame of when they're allowed to go back in, if that becomes the case. Otherwise, they could find themselves in just very suicidal missions that you come out and you're not expecting to live through that at that point.
Well, and the reason I see it that way is if it's a solo stealther who's just one person by himself in like a large scale battle, and she sneaks around into the keep, goes to where the healers are, and there's like 4 people around the healer defending them, and they pop out and start stabbing them, I don't feel like they should have a chance to survive that fight. They may kill the healer. Maybe they do kill the healer. I don't know. Depends on how much damage they do and how much attention people are paying. But most likely they should die for killing that healer. But if a stealther goes in there with a squad of like 3 or 4 other stealthers and pops out and there's another squad of like 5 or 6 people there, maybe 1 or 2 of the stealthers die, but the other ones survive long enough to bamf back out and be like, bye, and they pop back out because the other team couldn't do enough damage to them before they, their timer reset or whatever it is.
It's a fair answer.
It comes because then it comes down to what you bring to the table, how well you prepared, and picking appropriate targets. If you're a solo stealther, you shouldn't be picking a target that is more than 1 or 2 people, or you should expect to die.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true.
Because I will say, one of the things that ticks me off the most is like WoW-style stealth, where the rogue comes up to you, pops out, stuns you, does a bunch of damage, and then goes invisible again. And you're like, are you fucking serious?
Yeah.
That just infuriates me, because you don't even get a chance to hit them. You're just like, you don't get a chance to have any kind of retaliation. At the very least, if someone kills your healer and you get to kill them back, you feel a bit better about it.
And thankfully, there are, as of yet, really no like hard stuns being planned for the game in the world of CC in Camelot Unchained. So that's kind of not a deterrent, but a way to lessen the concern of the Veil use with stealthers. It's not going to be hopefully not going to be a bam, 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 you're dead kind of situation, or bam, 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 you're stunned for the next 10 seconds and can't do anything as I go back into stealth and then come back out and do that again. And
I would also be somewhat okay with, if they had an emergency teleport back into stealth, back into Veil, that caused them a bunch of damage or something, like dropped them down to 10% HP and they had to slow regen their health or something back, or go find a healer or whatever to heal themselves. So it basically took them out of the fight for a while. I'd be somewhat okay with that, but just picturing that as a non-stealther, sitting there having to deal with that and knowing that a stealther can pop out, stab, and then immediately jump back in and there's nothing you can do about it, that's kind of infuriating.
Yeah, for a lot of people it is, unless you happen to be the stealther.
It's great for the stealther, yeah, they love that. Bamf in and out all day. That is great for people that are playing rogues, but it sucks for the tank. So the other question I had is, if I can read my own handwriting, what do you think is the most important thing that stealthers add to Camelot Unchained?
Pressure in PvP environment. There's nothing nothing that causes more anxiety in a PvP match in a competitive match, especially with like 8 people versus 8 people, than, especially when you're a ranged or healer, than a stealther coming out of stealth and in your face doing something to you. That changes the whole mentality of thinking, because you're no longer following a plan, you're following surviving. All you're caring about is, how do I not die in this moment?
I very much agree. That was mine as well. And Skylar's basically saying the same thing, a backline threat. I think the huge thing that stealthers add is that you can't just get up into lines and throw all your melee people in the front line and assume that's going to be perfectly fine. All those people staying in the back of the group are never going to know when a stealther or a group of stealthers will just pop out and start stabbing them and killing them all. So you have to plan that accordingly. You can't just put your siege behind your main line and just think you'll be fine bombarding the city, because stealthers might actually come around and burn all your siege towers.
They present a variable in combat that is a little harder to anticipate.
I do also feel like the addition of a new battlefield is an important thing to consider as well, because it does add a layer of complexity to what's going on in siege fights, and in any fight really. But I largely think in terms of large battle fights when I'm trying to think of the balance of these things.
All of that. They also, with the backline thing, they also represent hitting things on multiple points. When you can't see them, they can come from angles and work opposite, almost like flanking elements, and you get a little more strategy when that comes to be the case. If they're like a team of 3 stealthers who are now come from behind, you've got enemies in the front, enemies in the behind, or wherever they're coming from. It's no longer obvious, like you said, what to do or where you're focusing your intents on, and it just changes strategy.
Yeah, someone mentioned this before, that without stealthers, range is going to reign supreme in the game, and I do think there's a certain degree of real possibility for that stealthers are an important counter to the ranged abilities in the game. I don't know of anything that is going to be able to match the firepower of archers in the game unless we have stealthers that can sneak up and start stabbing them.
We are already seeing that effect in beta tests.
Absolutely. You can have a heavy fighter who has charge and is like full on sprinting at 2 archers, and the archers still kill him when he's halfway there. It's just like and you die, and you're just like, well, that sucked. Time to respawn, I guess. Now, certainly that's got to be balanced a lot more, and that hasn't been balanced yet, so it's going to have to be balanced. No. But it's still a very real possibility that stealthers are important to establishing that balance, and that's part of why, them coming in after launch, I'm like, that's going to change so much about the meta of how the game works.
I agree, and they're, at least their sample components, I think they're the one class that will stand the most to benefit from movement impairing effects, assuming they get to dish them out. There'll be an element, I think, a little bit of an element of control in the battlefield as well. Focus firing certain, high profile targets, as well as applying movement impairing effects.
Yeah, I do think one thing that'll be important, this is not really a stealth discussion, but one thing that'll be important for the whole ranged without stealth issue is when fighters have active blocking. At current, you can equip shields, but you don't actually have like an active blocking mechanic, which reduces your damage and stuff. If heavy fighters can sprint and actually hold a shield in front of them to reduce range damage and stuff like that, that may be a method of helping to instill some level of balance between ranged combatants and like the especially if it's like particularly good against piercing, like arrows, as it kind of should be. But that would help to balance it out a little bit without the stealthers. But I still think it's kind of a issue adding the stealthers post-launch.
I'd love to see them, to some small degree, be able to bring non-stealthers into the Veil with them for temporary periods of time. I think that might, to some extent, help some of that potential issue of getting closer to your ranged targets. Again, just minor, on a very, very minor level, because that can be broken so easily.
I'm like, I picture whole groups teleporting essentially behind armies.
Like long cooldown, short time frame, bringing a person, into the Veil with you.
I could see that being interesting. Maybe, as you said, like if one stealther could bring one person in for like a minute. For like 1 minute, and
I wouldn't even go that long. Like
they
15
traverse
seconds
up to the area, and then they pop right back out, so that they can help them cross the grounds. That might be a thing. it would have to be very limited, or I feel like there would be a lot of ways to
Super
abuse
limited.
it.
Super limited.
I don't know. I don't see. I kind of see the idea of having stealth characters not be able to use chat when stealth, but I can't say that I agree with it because one, most organized groups are going to have voice comms. So at that point, you're just really crippling pugs. You're not really causing problems for people who are organized. You're just going to be limiting pugs compared to them and making them less useful. But also, I do think that the more important thing is to limit how much the stealthers can see when they're stealthed, more so than limiting their ability to communicate that. Because again, if you don't, that just starts trampling on the scout abilities and the purpose of that class.
Yeah. I did have one further question that I've thought of, which is a Chris question, but involves some crafting elements in the Veil. I guess more just an opinion question. Do you think it would be unreasonable for them for CSE that is, to add any kind of gathering element that is specific to being in the Veil? We know everyone can gather to some extent. Should there be a resource type that is only available by stealthers in the Veil?
I would actually say no, because I do feel like crafters need to have the potential to gather all their stuff by grouping with other people. Going into the depths, so on and so forth. So I do think that would be, I think that's a good idea for the depths. I do think that would be a little problematic in the Veil, but you know what I kind of would like to see, because other classes are all inhibited by this stuff too, especially archers. If the stealthers had to use some kind of a material component to cross over into the Veil, and so they had to have craftable ammunition or items from crafters in order to facilitate their Veil walking. Archers have to get it, and maybe they can do some minor popcorn crafting of it themselves, like archers can. But archers have to get crafted arrows, so why should they be able to jump back and forth out in the Veil without having to rely on crafters to some extent?
That would uplift crafter responsibility a little further, especially if it was a crafter only thing that could be made, and not popcorn crafting. But
yeah, and maybe
interesting thought.
And if they if they wanted to add some kind of a penalty or issue with being in the Veil long term, they could also tie it to that. Maybe if stealthers have their own popcorn version to do it, it has a greater degree of those penalties or whatever they want to apply for being in the Veil. But then if you can get better ones from the crafters, and those better versions have reduced penalties or maybe even no penalties, or it may only start to apply penalties after you've been in the Veil for like 10, 20 minutes, so on and so forth. So then it's exactly like archers. Archer can make their own arrows, but they're little crappy arrows. And then they can get super awesome arrows from crafters, but they have to be careful about when and how they use them.
Yeah. It's an interesting thought.
Expensive.
Yeah.
It just seems like everyone else, it's kind of tied into crafting. Heavy fighters don't have components, but they certainly are going to be having probably a lot more armor repairs than other people, I would imagine, from crafters. The healers, the physician, has to get flasks from crafters.
Stone healers have stones.
So maybe the stealthers need little veil crossing amulets or something that they just...
Like ninja, just throw it on the ground, green smoke, and you're in the Veil.
Exactly. Each realm will have a different one. The Arthurian can have some kind of an amulet that just kind of makes them go woo and they disappear. The Viking can have some kind of a big runic rock that just like they erupt into lightning or something and go and disappear. I don't know. And the TDD turn into a flower. That was a joke, but okay, it was 50% a joke.
It wasn't a joke at all.
I mean, they could do that, Skylar. They could make it so that crossing into the Veil does damage to their armor or something, so that, again, it just requires repairs. Um, I kind of like the idea of having things that specifically get crafted, because I feel like everybody's going to have to make armor repairs at some point. So the people who are repairing armor are already going to have stuff to do. Um, but does anybody else have any stealth questions or concerns about the stealth system in Veil and how it works while we're here? A lot of this is all speculation, but
Most of it is speculation.
95% of this is speculation. Yeah, there's a lot of things to propose. I stopped posting things on the forum because we have the show, so I stopped kind of posting things on the forum and being like, we should do this. And I'm like, I mean, I know I don't assume that the devs watch our show on the regular, but I'm like, I hope either they occasionally take things from it, or maybe other people post them or something. I don't know, because we talk about so many different ideas on here. I'm like, if I was posting these on the forums, I'd be posting all day. Maybe if there are some ideas that come out that are people particularly like, then that'll get on the forums in some capacity, and if not, then it must not have been that good.
It's a good question. Which class looks best when you're talking about a war of stealthers or stealth war between, we'll just call it the stealth class. Scouts don't do a whole lot of combat oriented things. Mm-hmm. So between the stealth, I would say that the Veil Stalker or the Shadow Walker, which are the Arthurian and the Viking, respectively, are the two best candidates. The reason why is that at least the sample components of the red cap imply needing a lot of dead bodies already kind of in existence on the ground to utilize some of their stuff. A lot of blood-focused things, which is a very, very finite resource.
Yeah, I was going to say the red cap definitely seems to be the strongest against mages.
Yeah.
For sure, because they could just do a lot of blood damage and stuff, which the mages are already going to be using blood for casting, and that is potentially just really nasty.
Yeah. So Veil Stalker or the Shadow Walker have my vote for being the supreme amongst the three versus three of them.
Yeah, largely I think the scouts in that, the scouts, we don't even know for sure if scouts can detect stealthers. They can mark them, sort of. We know there's some kind of capacity, but whether they can do that when stealthers are in the Veil, I don't know that that's necessarily revealed. I kind of hope they can, at least to a limited range, but we don't know, because so far nobody can see stealthers when they're in the Veil. But I think scouts might have a capacity to detect a stealther, but if a stealther really wants to pop out of stealth and kill a scout, I don't think the scout's going to have much of anything they can do about it. They're probably going to just die. Unless they're keeping near their allies and stuff, of course. They can maybe run. But combat-wise, the scouts aren't supposed to be that powerful, so they're more point out the stealther, hopefully, and have other people deal with them than dealing with them themselves.
It would be funny to see just a match of stealthers versus each other. One, because it would be like kind of watching an Ant-Man fight. You're just not seeing anything happen. They're all just kind of running around the Veil. But when they do come out, they're all trying to position themselves behind the other person. So they're just running in circles trying to backstab each other.
Yeah, it has been a while since I've really looked specifically at a lot of the stealther class information.
It's all old. None of the component stuff is updated since when they did the class reveals many eons ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be a while. Plus, I don't think, I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong. I don't think Ben has gotten to the stealther class as his first pass ability change that we've heard some of the other classes have gone through, because they aren't a launch class.
Yeah.
So
we will have stealth at launch, but only because of archers, really.
yeah.
Which, with how things are going, I was planning on playing an archer, but with how things are going, I'm going to end up playing a heavy fighter or something because nobody else wants to play one. Everybody else is like, no, I want to play. We have like way too many healers and crafters in our guild. That's
Yeah.
we have to hire mercenaries. No, I'm sure that will rectify come launch, but at present case, we have to hire heavy fighter mercenaries to protect all of our casters.
We'll see how it goes.
Which we don't even have that many mages either. We have people that are specifically like healers and crafters, which is healers out the wazoo. And I'm like, but I want to shoot arrow. God, I guess I'll carry a shield. All right. Somebody's got to protect you people.
We will be the guild that cannot die but cannot kill anything else.
It's a standard thing. It's a standard running thing with me. Every MMO, I'm like, I'm going to play something besides a tank, and then I end up playing a tank.
Yeah.
Because that's what we need. And I secretly like it. Yeah, first world problems. Too many healers. It currently in beta, it doesn't work that well, actually, because I got into one of the tests and I was like, I'm gonna make a healer because last time we didn't have like any healers, and I got in there and there was like all healers. Like half of our force was healers, and we were getting wrecked. I was like healing people, and since then I just rolled heavy fighter because there's never enough heavy fighters, and so.
Yeah. It's pretty standard to play a tank as a leader figure in PvP.
Yeah. It's kind of an easier thing to do and sit there and be like, all right, stab. All right, everybody go do this while I'm stabbing this guy. I'm still hitting the button to stab him. Hey, you, shield. Get back there.
Yeah. You're the first to initiate things. You run in first and everyone follows you.
Just follow me and shoot the crap out of the guy I hit.
Yeah.
Anyway, sounds like we've about exhausted our topic of stealth. So I will go ahead and end our recording and conclude our discussion for tonight. We want to thank everybody for hanging out and also for watching this later if you're catching the recording. We will be back in 2 weeks for yet another topic of the Unchained Vodcast. We might have Chris back with us by that point. I don't know for certain yet. So...
It'll be
thanks,
close.
everybody, and we'll see you when we see you.
Later.